The Backrooms is an absolute internet phenomenon, and this video is something a little bit different. There are a lot of tutorials showing you how to make your own Backrooms levels in Blender, but this one uses Unreal Engine 5 to show you how to create a first-person playable Backrooms Level 0. We'll go from a completely empty project to a full playable level, even packaging and building it for Windows PC. So let's get straight into it. The first thing we need to do is create a new project. So fire up the Unreal Engine 5 editor. And what we'll want to do is choose the game section, and we'll choose the first person template. Leave the settings as desktop, maximum, no starter content, no ray tracing, and then give the project whatever name you want. I'm going to call mine Backrooms Tutorial and click Create. And hopefully after a few seconds you'll see the sample map. Click Dismiss on the plugins dialog here and Update on the project file is out of date. So we don't want to use this sample level, we want to create a new basic level to start off with. So go up to the menu, File, and click on New Level, and we'll choose the basic level, the basic template as our starting point. So click on Create, and you'll now have the sky and atmosphere. We'll get rid of that later, but it's useful to have some lighting while we create the shell and internal walls of our room. And you also have a floor. Now to move around in this viewport, you can hold down the right mouse button, and then just like most modern games, you can use W, A, S and D to move forward, backward, left and right. And in addition to that, you can use the Q and the E keys to move up and down. So E goes up and Q goes down. So using those combinations of 6 keys while holding the right mouse button, you can move around and see everything you're seeing. And you can see if I zoom out, there is my floor. And the floor, if I select it, is also shown in this outliner panel on the right hand side. So you can see the floor there. And if we look at the details panel below it, you can see here it has the scale of the floor. And the scale at the moment is 8 by 8. The scale of this floor component is each unit is 10 meters. So you can have whatever size you want, but if you want to follow on exactly with me for now, I'm going to look for a 40 square meter room. So let's change this scale to, if you click on this lock button, it will change all of the axes at the same time. So lock this and click on 4, and you'll see that the floor has now reduced to half the size. And if you want to zoom in on a component, press F for focus or frame, and it will fill the viewport with that element in the scene. So now we have our project and our level set up. We haven't yet saved our level, so you can see at the top it says Untitled with an asterisk. So we want to click on Save, and this is our project folder structure. So let's keep things organized. Right click here and create a new folder. We'll call this Levels. Double click in it and give it a name of Backrooms Level 0. You won't be able to put any spaces in it. So Backrooms Level 0, and click Save, and you can see in the tab at the top we now have the level saved as Backrooms Level 0 within our project. And we're ready to move on to the next stage of the project, which is to create the exterior walls. To create our external walls, we're going to use the modeling tools within Unreal Engine. So if you go up to the top where it says Select Mode and select the modeling mode here. This is where you can create and adjust shapes. So the first thing I want to do is just change a couple of settings. If you go down to the bottom here where it's got a little gear icon, click on this, and what I want to do is change the asset generation location to a global asset path and untick the per user auto gen subfolder. What this means is that anything we create will be put in this generated folder at the top level of the project. So with that done, close it down and let's create our first wall. So we will use the box shape tool and click on this, and you can see that you have various dimensions. So we know the dimensions of our floor are 40 square meters. So we're going to create the first wall. So the width of the wall is going to be 4,000 centimeters or 40 meters. The depth I'm going to make 20 centimeters. So that's the thickness of the wall. And the height I'm going to make 4 meters high. So 400. So you want to make sure that the width, depth and height are these values, 4,020 and 400. And we'll also just assign a material to this as well. We'll change it later on, but just so that it shows up in the project, we will change it to, say, a blue color. So if you type blue here, then you'll see various blues. If you don't see anything here, then make sure in the settings here you have show engine content and show plugin content. That will show everything every content associated with the Unreal Engine project. So as I said, I've chosen blue here, and I'm going to choose this anim sharing blue. It doesn't really matter which one we choose at this point in time. And now if you go over to your viewport window, you'll see that you have a blue box here, a blue wall. And as you drag it towards the front, you see that you just get to the front, and then just after you get to the front, it goes over to the edge. So when you get to the edge here, just go back slightly. We can always move it if we need to. Just get it into place and drop it. And you'll see if we press F that we zoom in on it. And finally click the complete button, and now we have our wall there in place. And just check that it's lined up properly by moving around. If you find that it's not lined up at any side, you can use the arrows here to move it around or up and down in place, but that looks fine for me. So what we will do now is we will name this. So this box or this wall has been created in two places. It's been created in the project, ready for us to duplicate. So let's rename this by clicking on it, hit F2, and let's call it outside wall. And it's also been created in our project folder as well, in case we wanted to use it elsewhere in the project or even migrate it to other projects. So if you press Control and space, it brings up your folder project structure here, and here you have this generated folder, and within that we have our wall. So again, we can click on that, press F2 to rename it, and let's call this outside wall as well. Okay, so now we have our first wall. You can press Control Space again to lose the content browser. What would be useful now is to have the other three walls on our room. So let's come out of the modeling mode. So go back up here and just click select, and that goes back to our general viewpoint. Move around if you want, just to zoom out as you want. Now, to create the other three walls, it would be useful to be able to see a top-down view of this to move it around. So in order to do that, go into the three boxes here on the viewport, the sort of burger menu, and if you go down to where it says layouts, you can choose a 2-panel layout here, and you'll see that you'll have the perspective viewport on the right, and then on the left, hopefully you'll have this top wireframe viewpoint. And if you use your scroll wheel on your mouse, you should be able to scroll in and out, and you should be able to also use the right mouse button to grab and move this around. So you can sort of move it around, zoom in and out until you've got it centered on the screen. If it's not showing top and wireframe here, you can click on here and set that to top, and click on this and set it to wireframe. Okay, so we now want to duplicate our wall 3 times. So make sure you've got the wall selected, so you can either select it here in the screen, or you can select it in the outliner over here. But once you've got it selected, we can now create a duplicate. And it's probably useful here to set the snapping to a value that means you can get it into place easily. So you see here at the top of the tool menu, we have these snapping checkboxes, so you can switch them on or off, and then you can set what you want the value to snap to. So let's snap it to 100 centimeters or 1 meter, and then go to this top down view here, and to duplicate something rather than move it, you hold the Alt key down at the same time. So hold your Alt key down and then start dragging the wall and over to the other side. You should find that it snaps into place at the other side of the room. So we now got 2 walls, and now we want to create our 3rd wall. So again, use the Alt key to duplicate it. For now, just drag it into the middle somewhere, and we now need to rotate it. So to rotate, press the R key on the keyboard, the E key on the keyboard, and you'll see that it changes, the tool changes to a circle. And now what we can do is we can just position our mouse in that circle and drag it down until it rotates by 90 degrees, and it's snapping to 10-degree increments, so you should be able to find it quite easily. And then once we've got it rotated where we want it, press W on the keyboard, and that will go back to the move tool. And what we can do is we can now just move it to one side of the room. And of course, you guessed it, we want to now duplicate this one last time. So press your Alt key down and drag the duplicate of the final wall over to the other side. And now we have our 4 walls in place. And just for organization, let's group these together, or not group them, but put them in a folder so that it doesn't get too messy in our outliner. So click on the first wall here and shift click on the last wall, right click and do move to, create new folder, and we'll call it outside walls. And we can now collapse this and have a much leaner outline view here. So this is our room with the outside walls created. What we'll do next is create a first player view where we can run around inside our room. Before we set up our first player view, now would be a good time to save the project. So click on the save icon here, so the asterisk disappears, and let's go back to our single viewport view. So in the perspective view, click on the restore viewport in the top right, and we'll go back to our single view. So to put a player in our room, what we need to do is use the add menu here at the top, and if you go into the basic menu, you've got a player start. So with the left mouse button, just drag that along, and you can put it wherever you want, but I'm going to put it on the left hand side near the wall, and you can see that it drops a little capsule into the room at that point in time, and by default it should be pinned to the floor, which is what you want. So with that done, we actually can go into play mode and see what it looks like. So click the play button here, and you can see if you click on the viewport, we can move around. We can use W, A, S and D to move. If we hit a wall, it won't go through it. So it's working, but there are a couple of things that we need to change. First of all, I don't want this crash test dummy arm or hand in the view, so we want to get rid of that. Second thing is it's quite fast, so I'd like to slow down the movement so it's more of a sedate walk rather than running around the room. So let's change those things and see what it looks like afterwards. So to come out of play mode, press the escape key on your keyboard and we're now back into our regular editing mode here. So we need to change that first person character to adjust the walking speed and the hand. So to do that, go into your content browser by doing Control Space and go to the top level content, and in search content search for first, and you'll find this BP first person character. This is part of the setup. When we selected the template, we selected the first person game type, so this came with it. So double click to open that up, and if it opens up in its own window, like mine's done here, and you want to see it in a larger viewport, just drag it up to the top of the screen and you'll see the full version. And you'll see all of these strange nodes here, all to do with controlling the input and output. We don't need to change any of those. We go to the top and do the viewport, and you'll see the visual setup for our first player. So you can see there's a camera, there's the hands here, the direction of movement. So first thing we want to do is we want to get rid of those hands. So to do that, click on the first person mesh. You'll see it'll highlight the hands. And over in the details panel, if you go down to, or just type in the search here, hidden, you can just check hidden in game, and that way it won't be shown when the game is running. So that's the first thing to do. Second thing we wanted to do is we wanted to change the speed at which our character was walking around. So to do that, go to the character movement component here, and you'll see in the details there's lots of different settings here, but the main one here is in the character movement walking. It's got of this maximum walk speed. So at the moment it's 6 meters per second or 600 centimeters per second. So I want to reduce that to 200 centimeters per second. So that's the second thing I want to do. And there is a third thing I want to do as well, which is to adjust the height of the camera. When I was running around, I noticed that it seemed a little small or a little low compared to where I wanted the height of my character. So with our camera selected, we can change the height of this camera. So you can either just drag it up here with the blue arrow, or you can change the item here. So at the moment it's 60 centimeters. I want to pretty much double that. So if I make that 120, you'll see that my camera raises higher up, so I'll get a higher viewpoint as if I'm a taller person. So with those three things done, click on compile and save, come out of our first person character, and let's see what it looks like now. If we go into play mode, I look around, you can see that I'm higher, so that I'm sort of about halfway up the wall. If I start to do WASD, you can see that I now am moving substantially slower than I did before, which is the pace I want. And the final thing you'll notice is that the hand that showed before is no longer in the scene. So we have now completed the setup for the first person player. Let's now create the internal walls for our room. Don't forget to keep saving as you go along by hitting that save button or Control S. And the approach we're going to take for creating the internal walls is to create a segment that's 4 meters wide by 4 meters high, and then we'll duplicate that around to get the layout we want. So we're going to use the modeling tool again to create our segment. Go into the select mode, modeling, and use the box tool again. You should have the same settings you left when you did the external wall. So instead of having a width of 4000 or 40 meters, we'll reduce this to 400. And make sure you hit enter to enter that. So now we have a 4 meter by 4 meter wall with a 20 centimeter thickness. the material should still be set to blue. And if you go into your scene here, you should see that wall segment here. So don't worry too much about the placement at the moment, just put it roughly in the center here and click on complete. And now what we want to do, if we press F on the keyboard, it will zoom in. We can zoom out a bit here again. This may be sufficient for you, but if you watch the Backrooms Level 0 videos, you'll notice that the walls actually have a baseboard that sticks out of the wall as well. So let's create that to make it more authentic. And to do that, we'll go back into our box tool and we will reduce the height of this segment to 20. Now, if I'm doing this at the moment, it's going to fit exactly. You can see if I hover over it, it fits exactly in the wall. Actually, what we want to do is we want to make sure it sticks out slightly. So change our width from 400 to 405 centimeters, so we get an extra 5 centimeters sticking out. And let's change the depth also to 25 centimeters so that we have it sticking out a bit at the front and the back. And we need to change our material as well to contrast with the wall, so change that to green. And now in here you can place this. Don't try and place it exactly in under the wall at the moment, we'll do that in a minute. Just move it in front of the wall and just drop it down there and finally hit complete. And you'll see on our outliner here we now have two new elements, box and box 2. What we're going to do is we're going to position those together to create our wall segment and then merge them into our final wall. So let's come out of modeling mode now, click select, and if your position snapping here is 100, which it probably is, then change it down to 10, which will give us a bit finer control for moving things around. And let's now just move around using WASD while the right mouse button is selected, and we'll put it into the right position. So make sure your box 2 is selected, the baseboard, and drag it in. And you should find if you just drag it to one side, can you see how we've got the 2.5 centimeter overhang of our skirting board. So we now have the wall segment with the baseboard. What I want to do is now combine these two to create our final wall segment. So to do that, select the box and shift select box 2 to select both of them. Go up to your tools and merge actors. And you'll see this dialog here. It'll show the two boxes we've got selected. If you look at the merge settings, you probably don't need to change anything, so just leave those as they are. What we will do though is we'll replace our source actors so that the two boxes will disappear and we'll just be left with the one new mesh. So click on merge actors. It will say where do you want to save it. Let's put it in our generated folder so you can see that's where we've got our two boxes we just created, and let's call it the backroom, you can't have spaces, wall segment, and click on save. Okay, now close down this dialog box and you can see that our two boxes have been replaced by backroom wall segment. And if you look in your generated folder, you now have a new merged segment here as well called backroom wall segment. And probably a good idea to do a save at this point in time. And now we have our wall segment, we can start to lay out the room as we want to. So let's go back to our two panel view. So click in the top right here and you'll see that we have the perspective view over here. And we have our top-down wireframe view here. So let's zoom in a bit here and we'll see our single wall segment. What I want to do is I want to first of all create an L-shaped segment, and then I'll duplicate those L-shaped segments into groups of 4 and then duplicate them again. So let's start off with our first backroom wall segment selected. which it is, and let's just simply rotate it to start off with. So click on the, with it selected, click on the E button on your keyboard to bring up the rotation tool. Actually, we need to duplicate it first, so go back, press W to go back to the move tool, and let's just move it with the Alt key selected, just move it out, and that creates a second wall segment. Now press the E key to rotate it round 90 degrees, and then go back to the W key to put it into position. So I'm going to move it roughly where it's joining here, and then just zoom in here, and you should find that it's probably snapped in with this snapping of 10 here, so that it looks in the right place. If you want to be sure, just go to your perspective view over here and just zoom in, just check it looks okay. It looks fine there. So now you've got your first L-shaped segment here, and what we can do is we can select these two segments here, and we can press Ctrl G to group them together. So we can still ungroup them and change them around, but what we've done is we've sort of glued them together, which will make it easier to move them around as an L-shaped segment. Right, so zoom out, and let's start to create a group of 4 walls. And this is where you can have fun and do whatever you want. So I'm going to set the snapping back to 100 or 1 meter. And what I'll do is I will create a group of 4 L-shaped segments to start off with. So I'm going to use the Alt key to duplicate rather than move. So I've got the Alt key held down, and you'll see that I can snap it here. Once I've got to there, maybe do it 1, 2 more times. So you've got a couple of meters in between, and then same sort of thing again, Alt to duplicate, make sure there's a meter in between, and then same thing again. And what we can do is we can now rotate them as well. So let's select this one in the top right, press the E key to rotate, and I'm going to rotate this by 180 degrees. Let's select this one in the left. Again, you can do whatever you want here. So I'm going to rotate this to create an internal wall, and this one at the bottom right, I'm going to rotate this one to create a corner in the center. So I've got this group of 4. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one of these. I'm going to shift select the other 3. Zoom in if you need to. So now I've got this group of 4, and then press Ctrl G again, and what that'll do is it'll group this now into a group of 4. And I'm going to start off by placing it roughly in the center. So press your W key on your keyboard to get the move tool. I'm not using Alt because I don't want to duplicate at the moment. All I want to do is I want to move it so it's roughly in the center of the, something like that. So you can see that this center point here is roughly between those 2 corner points. So now I've got these segments in the center. Now what I want to do is I want to duplicate these 8 more times to create the full room. So let's just do that by holding Alt down and move it along, Alt down again, move it back. And another quick way to do this is we can group it again. So do Shift click to select everything, Ctrl G to group. Now we've got a whole row of walls, and we'll do our final 2 duplications. So hold Alt down, move it to the top, hold Alt down again to duplicate, and move it down to the bottom. And if you go wrong at any point in time, just delete and start again. It's not an issue. But now we have, if we come out of our dual panel mode here by clicking the top right and we zoom out, you can see that we have a maze-like room of walls. And to finish off this part, let's keep it organized. Let's go to the first backroom wall segment. You'll see it selects a few because we've got them grouped together. Go down to the next group, press Shift to select those, press Shift for the next group. So now we've got all of the backroom wall segments created or selected, and we'll put them in its own folder for organization by right clicking, move to create new folder, and we'll call this one internal walls. And now we have a nice organization of internal walls, outside walls, the floor, and the player start. And that's the hardest part of the project done by creating the maze. Let's just save this. Let's go into play mode, see what it looks like. So you can see that we now have our walls. We can move around. We bump into the walls. If you don't like the layout, you can always delete those walls and start again. But the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create our basic yellow material for the floors, walls and ceiling. So as you know, the walls in Backrooms Level 0 are not blue and green. It's not, the floor is not grey. Everything is a dirty, unsettling yellow colour. So in order to apply that to our level, we need to first of all create a material with that colour. So use Control Space to open up the content for your project. Go to the top level, and what we'll do is we'll create a new folder first of all. So new folder, and let's call this materials, because we'll be creating some more materials later on in the project. Open it up, and there's nothing at the moment. Right click and create new material, and let's call this m_backroom yellow. And so let's double click on this to open it up, and make sure you drag it to the top of your project to dock it there. And what you'll see here is a material attribute node with various parameters for the material. And there's a lot of things you can do with materials to make them look lifelike and realistic. For this backroom yellow, this is going to be about as simple as it gets. We just really want a yellow colour. So to do that, left click on some empty space in your material graph and press the 3 key on the keyboard above the QWERTY keys, and while you press that down, left click, and you'll get this colour node appear, and by default it's a black colour. So let's double click on that to open it up. If you remember your colour theory for red, green, blue, if you mix red and green together you'll get yellow. So make red value of 1, make green value of 1, and we get a bright yellow. However, we don't want a bright yellow, it's too lurid for us. We want a dark, dirty yellow. So go to the value parameter here and reduce this from a value of 1 to a value of 0.05, and you can see it takes down the darkness value, so it goes from light to completely black, and you can see now our yellow has turned murky. So let's click OK here. So at the moment we've created the colour, but what we need to do now is connect this to the base colour of our material, and you can see on the preview on the left here we now have a yellow sphere showing. This is a preview of what our material looks like, but you also might notice that it's slightly shiny as well, and we don't want to have any shininess. We want a matte finish. So in order to do that we need to change this specular value to 0. So that's between 0 and 1. 1 is completely shiny, 0 is completely unshiny. So to create a value of 0, press 1 on the keyboard above the QWERTY keys and left click. That will create what's called a scalar value, a single value, and by default it's set to 0, which is what we want. So let's take that and plug that into the specular, and you can see now on our preview on the right we have a matte yellow finish, which is exactly what we want. So let's click save on this material. After a few seconds it will have saved and compiled, And if you come out, we're now ready to apply this material to our surfaces. So let's start off with the floor. So if necessary, just collapse our folders here. Let's start off with the floor, and you can see that it's got in the details folder here, or details panel here, you've got the materials. At the moment it's set to this procedural grid material. So click on the drop down, type or start to type backroom, and you'll see M backroom yellow. Select that and you can see our floor has now changed to a murky yellow. Okay, next thing, let's do it for our exterior walls. So choose our outside wall folder, make sure all of the walls are selected, select the first one, shift click the last one, and let's change our blue material here, and again search for backroom and set that to the yellow. And now our outside walls are yellow, and yes, you guessed it, finally we want to change our internal walls. So let's open up the internal walls folder here and select our groups of internal walls. So at the moment there are 3 groups here, so scroll down a bit, shift select the second group, and then shift select the third group, so you should now have all of them selected. And in order to change the material here, we're going to have to ungroup them. So you can either press Shift G, or you can right click, group, and do ungroup. Make sure you've selected all of them so that it now shows these 2 materials here for the backroom wall segments. And select the first one, type backroom, make it backroom yellow, and our baseboard is still green here, anim sharing green, so select that and again search for backroom yellow. So we now have everything the murky yellow. So if we go into play mode, you can see that it's starting to resemble the level. So in the next step, we're going to create the ceiling and the ceiling lights, and we'll then be able to enclose this room completely and set up the lighting exactly the way we want it. Okay, it's time to create a ceiling and enclose our room. So the easiest way to do this is to duplicate the floor up to the roof line, and you'll find it easy to do that if you use the isometric view. So click on our maximize and restore viewports here. That'll go back to our 2 panel view here. This time though, let's go to the left view, so we're seeing it from the side, and you can select the floor here or select it in the perspective view or the outliner. And what we want to do is we want to duplicate that up to the top. Make sure that your grid snap value is set to 100 or 1 meter. That'll make it easier for you. And then hold the Alt key down and drag up to the ceiling, and you see it snaps to the top here. And once that's done, we can go back to our main view. It's called floor 2 at the moment in the outliner, so click F2 and let's call this ceiling. What you'll now notice is if we go into play mode, we have a pitch black room. Well, virtually pitch black. It's doing its best to show you a little bit of the light coming in through the walls, but we need to create our own internal lighting now. So let's come out of play mode by pressing escape. Let's first of all, let's remove the lighting outside because we don't need that anymore. So open up the lighting folder and select everything in here. So this is the sort of the sun and the sky. So everything from directional light, shift click down to volumetric cloud, and we'll delete it. And now you can see the scene goes completely black. So in the next step, we're going to create the specific sort of spotlights in the ceiling. But for now, let's just create a luminous ceiling so that we can start to see what the interior lighting is going to look like. So to do that, press Control Space. Make sure you navigate to your materials folder, which you may be in from when we created our basic backroom yellow material. And what we'll do now is we'll duplicate this material. So select it, press Control D to get a new material, and we'll call this material Backroom Ceiling. So at the moment it's exactly the same as our backroom yellow. So double click to open it up, put it up into the main window if it's not there already, and the difference between this material and the original material is that instead of having a base color, we're going to have an emissive color, which is effectively lighting the scene rather than just reacting to light on it. So let's take our yellow, let's actually make it fully bright. So change the value here to 1, so now you get a bright yellow. Don't worry about our specular for this, let's delete that, and then drag in fact what you can do is hold the control key down, you'll get a little hand, and drag it from the base color to emissive color. And I don't know if you noticed, but the preview now looks like a sort of a shiny yellow. So click on Save here, and we now need to apply this material to our ceiling. So go back to the main level, select your ceiling, go down in the details panel to the material, and in the drop down here, instead of M backroom yellow, we're now going to use M backroom ceiling. And as if by magic, the ceiling starts to glow and casts light on all of the materials around. So you can see as you move around, you can see the walls. And for example, and if you go outside the wall here, for example, just find it difficult to navigate back, just press play to go back into the player's position and then escape, and then you'll be back to where you started. Now you may have also noticed that when we start in play mode, or we go into the scene exposes a bit like our eyes do when we go in and out of light. It starts off dark and then adjusts until it gets into the auto expose setting. But it's going to be better if we have more manual control over the exposure here. So to do that, we need to introduce something called a post-process volume to our project. So in your, actually let's do a save, because we've got to this stage now. In the Add to the Project menu here, go to Volumes, and you'll find something here called Post-Process Volume. So drag this into your scene. It doesn't matter where it goes. Let's just put it in the middle there. And now you have in your project outline something called Post-Process Volume. This allows you to control a whole host of the look and the feel of the project on the screen. We'll be playing with it later to add some grit and grime to our first player view, but for now I just want to make sure that the exposure is correct. So the first thing we need to do is, if you go into the details panel while the post-process volume is selected, search for Unbound and make sure you check this option, Infinite Extent Unbound. What this means is that our settings apply to across the whole of the room rather than just within the little box that we just dragged on to the scene. So now click X to go back to the full set of details, and you'll see that one of the panels here is exposure. If you click on that, what we'll do is we'll check these first two. At the moment you see it's an auto exposure setting for metering. What I'll do is I'll change this to manual, and it'll immediately go black, and then we need to up our exposure compensation. So let's try a higher value. So that's way too high at the moment. Let's do 10. Yeah, so that's fine at the moment. So what we've got is we've got a nice sort of gloomy room. When we've set up our proper lighting in the ceiling, we'll have to probably come back and adjust this, but this is fine for now, and you can see that it stays constant. So when I go into play mode, there's none of this changes in values up and down. I can move around the room. We'll probably want it a bit lighter eventually, but this is fine for now so we can see what we're doing. So that's the basic ceiling setup with some light in our room. Next thing I want to do is I want to actually before we move to the putting the cube lights in, let's change our ceiling material so it's an actual grid material. If you look at the videos of Backrooms Level 0, the ceiling is a set of grid panels. So we need to change our material to show grid lines. So in order to do that, I've come out of play mode by pressing escape. We want to update our ceiling material to show grids. And the easiest way to do that is to find a tiling material and apply that to our existing ceiling material. And one of the nice things that comes with Unreal Engine is this Quixel bridge that provides a lot of textures and patterns that we can use in our project. So if you go to quickly add to the project and choose Quixel bridge, this is where you'll find all of these free assets to use. Absolute wealth of stuff here you can use. If you haven't already done so, make sure you sign in to this with your Epic Games account. You won't be able to download anything until you do that. And what we want to do is we want to now search in here for a texture, tiles texture. I've already done this. If you look at here, I've searched for square floor tiles. So if you search for that, and you'll find this square floor tiles texture. Typically you'd use it on the floor, like a bathroom floor, but actually it looks perfect for our ceiling as well. So once you've found that and selected it, select the quality you want. I would suggest go for medium quality. We're going to end up with a gritty look here as well, so there's no point in having too much detail in our texture. So medium quality, click on download and wait until it's downloaded the texture, and then finally click on add. And you'll end up with a new folder in your project called Megascan Surfaces Square Floor Tiles, and inside that are the relative bits of the texture with a material. We only really want this square floor tiles the color texture here, which we'll use. So now we've found that, close down bridge and open up your backroom ceiling material. So if you didn't leave it open, then you need to go back to your content browser, find it and double click on it. So what we want to do is we now want to apply this texture to the material as well. So to do that, drag in this square floor tiles ending in D. D means diffuse or color. So drag that in to the material. You can shut this content browser window down now. And how do we apply this to the color? Well, what we could do is we could simply just take out the RGB, which is the color value, and plug it into our emissive color. And you can see that it applies that here. So let's click on save. And if we go back to our level, you can see that we now have a tiled ceiling with the color of the tiling texture. Now if you want to change the scale of the tiling, go back to your material and click to the left of your texture sample, press U on your keyboard and left click, and you will get a texture coordinate. So this is a value that specifies how to treat the material from a tiling point of view. If you plug this in, nothing will change because it's a one-to-one ratio, but what we can do is we can multiply this by a tiling value. So if you drag out of here, click the multiply or press the multiply key or asterisk key on your num keypad, you'll get multiply node here. Let's multiply it by 2. Watch the preview on the side once I pull this into the UV input. Actually, you don't see a change there, but you might have seen a change in the preview window here. Let's just detach it. If I press Alt, yeah, can you see here you've got 4 tiles by 4 tiles. Once I drag this one in here, I've got 8 by 8. So if I save this and go back to the level, we've now got a denser tiling pattern here. So that's looking pretty good, but what if I still want this to be a yellowy texture up here? Okay, so let's go back to the material, and what we'll do now is we will take out one of the channels of this. Doesn't matter, red, green or blue. What we're really after is just the black or white value of this pattern. So let's take out from this color first of all, and again do an asterisk for multiply. And what we're going to do is we're going to multiply this color by the red channel, and then we'll plug that into the emissive color. And what that does is it takes the black and white value from this red channel and it multiplies that by the yellow. So we now get our broad color that we want, but we have the tile pattern as well. And we could reduce the yellow here if we wanted. In fact, let's try doing that. So let's take this and put our value back down to 0.05 so it's not so bright. Save this, go back to our level. You can see it's pretty dark at the moment, but we know we can change that by upping our exposure. So let's leave it there at the moment because we're going to add our lights in a minute, and that's probably going to make everything brighter here. So let's go on to the next stage, which is to create our fluorescent lights in the ceiling. Okay, so now we need to create our proper ceiling lights, but before we do that we need to create a new material with emitted white light. So go into your content window by pressing Control Space, go to the materials folder, and we'll create a new material. So right click, new material, and I'm going to call this M Ceiling Light, and double click to open it up. Put it on the top of the screen so it fills the whole screen, and this is going to be a very simple white light for our ceiling lighting. So click on the empty space, press 3 on the keyboard above QWERTY, left click, and that will create a color node, currently black. Double click on it and change the red, green and blue values to 111 to create a fully white light. And we're going to plug this into our emissive color to make an emitted white light. And now we will save that, and we can apply that to the lights that we're just about to create. So I've come out of that after saving it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a cube to represent our light, and we can scatter them up and down the ceiling. So if you go to the Add to Project and go into the Shapes submenu, you'll find a cube here. Drag it somewhere in to your screen. You can see I'm dragging it up on the ceiling, so it's sort of half in the ceiling. So just put it somewhere for now where you can see it. And now what we'll do is we'll apply our emissive light to it. So come over to the Details panel, and under Materials, change this basic shape material, and if you start to type ceiling, the ceiling light that we just created, if you click on that, it will light up. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to spread these all over the room. What is probably the best idea is to probably centralize it. Actually, let's put it at the right level first. So you can see that you've got the 3 axes here. If you drag the blue or Z axis, and you can drag it up. In fact, you need to probably change the snapping down to a lower value. Let's change the snapping to 10. Yeah, and you can drag it up, and you'll see you'll get to a point where it's in the ceiling. drag it down one, and then it's sticking out 10 centimeters from the ceiling. And what we'll do is we'll put it in the center and then we'll spread it around. So go over to the details panel and set your locations here to 0 and 0. It'll be over here somewhere where you can't see it. But what we'll do is we'll use our top-down view to drag it around a bit. And actually, before we do that, let's just rename it from cube here. Click F2 and let's call it ceiling light. Okay. Now click on the top right to see our two viewpoints, and we'll switch the left one here to a top view. And you can see that our cube is right in the middle of the room at the moment. And you probably guessed it, we're going to just duplicate this by using Alt and dragging it around. So let's change it back to the snap value to 100. And we will, using the Alt key, create a copy. And then the same again. So you see what I've done is I'm dragging it in between the groups of 4, and then I'll do one here at the end. And then I'll do the same again going the other way. So I'm just using Alt and creating these duplicates. And then what I can do is I can, once I've created a row here, I can select the first ceiling light over here, Shift, select the other one, and then I could just group them together. Don't even need to do that. I can just leave them selected, press the Alt key and drag it down. So you can see what I'm doing, same thing. And now I'm just going to fill it up with the top as well. So I'm just Alt dragging, and now I have 49 lights in my scene. You can see them spreading around on the perspective view. And just for organization, I'm going to select the first one over here on the outliner, Shift, select the last one, right click and move to create new folder, and we'll call this ceiling lights. And I'll collapse that now, so we've now got a nice organization here. So we don't need this perspective view anymore. So basically just click on the top right here to restore the main view. And the thing you'll notice now is that it's quite underexposed. So there's a couple of ways we can deal with this. We can either raise the brightness of the material, or we can raise our exposure value. I'll probably raise the exposure value and see what that looks like. But we need to just change our ceiling material so that it no longer emits any light. We did that temporarily before we created the lights. So let's go back to our material backroom ceiling, open that up, and now what we'll do is we'll move it from the emissive color. So hold down Control, you'll get the little hand, and move that back to a base color. So this material no longer emits any light, it just reacts to the cube lights we've just put on. So click on Save, wait a couple of seconds for it to compile, and now we have a completely dark room other than our lights. So let's try and raise the exposure and see if that works. So to do that, go down till you find your post-process volume in the outliner, go to the exposure, and let's try upping the exposure to 20. And you can see that's too bright now. So let's reduce it. 0.5. That probably isn't far off what we want. So we can adjust it later on. We're going to be adding some more materials. So let's leave it at that for now, and we'll adjust it if we need to later on. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on and do a couple more materials for the carpet and the walls. Okay, after a quick save, I want to look at the floor material or carpet material, and I want to create something that looks like a sort of weaved wool carpet. Not too much, but we'll just change the basic material and add in that effect. So to do that, we will go into our Content Explorer with Control Space. We will take our basic M backroom yellow material, Control D to duplicate it, and I'm going to rename this backroom carpet. Double click to open it up, put it on the top of the screen, and currently we have this yellow sort of solid cut block of yellow color. What I want to do is add in a texture to that, and the texture I'm going to add is one that comes with the Unreal Core engine content. And if I go into the Explorer, go to all and search for noise, you'll see here there's various textures with sort of random noise in them. If you don't see these, again, make sure in your settings you have show engine content and show plugin content. And the one I'm going to use is this one here, good 64 by 64 tiling noise. So drag that up into the material. You get that texture sample here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just see what that looks like by plugging it into the base color. So I'll plug it in here and click save. And actually what I'll do is I'll just drag this out so we can just give a bit of space here so that we can see the material at the same time. So I've clicked save here. It's not applied to the carpet yet because we haven't assigned it to the floor. So what I'll do is I will select the floor here and change the material from backroom yellow to backroom carpet. And now we can see, let's drag this back a bit. Now you can see that the floor is this sort of black and white noise. If you don't want to see the grid here, then just select the viewport and press G, and that'll get rid of all of the editor overlays. And if you press it again, it'll come back. So let's just do that temporarily. Press G, and you can see that we have this noise here. It's the wrong color because we still want it to be yellow, and it's spaced too far apart. So if you remember from when we did the tiling texture, what we can do is we can change the tiling of the noise. So we go to a bit of blank space here, press U and click the left key to get our texture coordinates, and then do a multiply here to multiply it by a value. So we'll do multiply it by, let's try 100. So that will make this more dense by 100 times. Click save. And now you probably can't even see it. It's much more densely populated. In fact, that might be too much. Let's just try 20. And you can probably see if I look down, I don't know how well it'll be on the YouTube compression, but you can see that sort of speckled look there. So we've got the look we're after, but we want it to be the same color. So in order to do that, all we need to do is multiply it by the color here. So take that out, multiply, drag in the noise, and plug that into the base color and click save. And now we have a carpet with a bit of roughness to it. So that's our carpet material done. Let's move on. In fact, before we move on to the wall here, I've noticed that the ceiling, I can't really see that grid pattern. So we probably need to lighten up that material. So just point your camera up. You can see a little bit of it here. Close down this carpet. We're finished with that. Go into your Content Explorer and get rid of any search filters you've got there at the moment. Go back to the materials folder and open up our M backroom ceiling. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to drag this out again just so we can see the results. The color here, I'm going to up the value, that's the darkness, up to 1, and then click save and see what effect that has. Okay, and that's exactly what I wanted. So now I can see the grid above here. So, and again, if you compare this to the videos that are online for this level, the ceiling is quite yellow in contrast to the carpet and the wall. Okay, so let's save that and let's move on to looking at the walls and putting some wallpaper on there. To add wallpaper to our internal walls, we first of all need to get a wallpaper material. So we're going to use our old friend Quixel Bridge to see if they've got some textures we can use. So go into the Add to the Project menu and go back to Quixel Bridge. And you can use the search here. I've already found one to search for this one. So search for old decorative wallpaper and you'll see you get this texture here. Now don't worry about the color of it because we're really only going to use the pattern. So we're going to use this to contrast between two shades of yellow. But select this one, select medium quality, click the download button and then click the add button, and just like we did before, it adds a new folder in your project with those textures in there. Okay, you can leave that open because we'll drag it into our material in a minute. Close down Bridge for now, and we need to create a new material for our wallpaper. So go into the materials folder, and what we'll do is we will take our basic backroom yellow material and Control D to duplicate it, and we will call it backroom wallpaper. Open it up and drag it somewhere into the top of the screen so that you can see everything, and then with our content browser mini window open here, what we'll do is we'll drag in this texture, and now you can close down that other content browser window. And let's do a couple of things. Let's leave that open here, go back to your viewport. What we need to do is we need to assign this new material to the walls. So open up your internal walls, select the first one, go down to the end, shift select the last one, and what we want to do is we want to leave the baseboard element, which I believe is element 1 as it is, and change element 0, which is the main part of the wall, to our wallpaper. We might have got that the wrong way around, but we'll see in a minute, and we'll be able to see the changes now when we do that. So do a quick save, go back to your material backroom wallpaper, and let's drag it out so we can see the effects as we change things. So first let's have a look at what this wallpaper looks like if we just plug that into the base color. So take the RGB output and put it into the base color and save. And you can see we've got a wallpaper that's first of all very large in scale. We want it a lot smaller than this, and secondly there's too much color in this. We want to have our yellows. So let's adjust the scale first, and you should have an idea how to do this from before. We just need to change the UV tiling here. So click in an empty space, U, and left click to get our texture coordinates, multiply to change the tiling, and plug that into the UVs. And now we'll change our tiling. Let's try 20, save. That's close, it's probably too dense, so let's do 10, save, and that looks about right to me. So we've got the scale right for the wallpaper. What we need now is for it to be yellow rather than white and red and yellow. And in order to do that, we need to think about what we're actually doing here. So currently we're putting out the color of here into our base color. Let's say, for example, we just took one of the channels here, like the red. Let's take the red and plug that into the base color and click save. what you'll see is it turns into a black and white view, which if you think about it, this red value is really just a value from 0 to 1, which is white and black. So it's still not yellow, but what we can do is we can use this as a control to interpolate or fade, blend between two colours. So this is our main colour here. Let's duplicate this. So do Control D, we get the colour again, and I'm going to make this one slightly darker. So I'm going to go into it and change the value from 0.05 to 0.02. So you see what we've got here is our basic murky yellow and a slightly darker yellow. And then what we can do is we can drag from here, and if you start to type lerp, you'll get this thing called linear interpolate. And what this does is it takes one value, which is our darker yellow, and a second value, which we'll plug into B, which is our lighter yellow, and the blend between them is controlled by this input called the alpha. So we'll use our wallpaper black and white to control the blend, and then we'll put the color output into our base color. And you probably can't see it here in the preview, but it's now it's still got the wallpaper pattern, but the wallpaper pattern is blending between darker yellow and medium yellow. So click on save, and we now have our wallpaper still in yellow but with the pattern on there. So click on save for that material. Let's come back in here, do a save, and let's see what it looks like from the player point of view. We haven't gone into player mode for a while. So if you go in here, it's looking pretty good. I can walk through. Might be a bit light, but we'll see later on as we go through. So it's looking pretty good. The next thing I want to do is, if you remember the videos, they're done on sort of VHS cameras and they're quite grungy. So what I want to do next is add some effects to add a bit more grit and dirt to the camera view. So let's get on with that. The way we add our Grungy Camera FX is to use the post-process volume that we added earlier on in the project in order to create or control the exposure. So if you click on this, you'll see that this has a lot of different sections that we can change. So for example, the bloom of the lights we're seeing here is controlled by this bloom here. So we can take the intensity here, and if we reduce it to 0, we no longer have any bloom on the light, but we can add a little bit of bloom here with values of sort of 0.1, 0.2. Let's leave it at 0.2. But if you go down here, there are other things you can add here as well. For example, chromatic aberration is something that sometimes happens in camera lenses, where it separates out the red, green and blue components of the image. So if I click on the intensity here and make it an intensity of, let's say, 10, you can see that this is overdone obviously, but you can see that like a prism you can see red, green and blue parts. So we don't need much of this. If we go 1 or 2, even 2 is probably too much, let's just put 1 there. It just adds that little bit of old camera lens effect. So let's leave that intensity at 1, and then let's look at the dirt mask. So what we can do here is we can add in dirt on the lens, again to add to the grunginess. So if you select the dirt mask texture, and in here if you search for dirt, you should find this screen dirt texture. Click on it. You can't see anything at the moment because we need to up the intensity. So again, let's overdo it to start off with. Make the intensity 10. And can you see, especially if I look at the lights, you've got these sort of almost like water marks on the lens. So we probably want to dial that down a bit, something like 2 or 3. I'll go down to 2 for now. and now we've got a bit of dirt on the lens. The other thing we could do here is we could look at some film grain as well. So that's further down. If we go down to, let's find the section here. Yep, film grain. So it's about just over halfway down. And what we can do is we can change the intensity. So again, let's put it up to 10. It looks like static on a TV. But if you just put in 1 or 2 here, it just adds that grain here. So I'll probably go for something like 1.5 just to add the value we want. And that's probably sufficient. You can come back and play with this if you want, but we've now added that grittiness to the camera. The next thing I want to do is add a camera shake to our movement. If I go into play mode at the moment, you can see that when I'm standing still, the camera is completely still. But what I want to do is I want to have this random gentle motion as if I'm slightly looking around, just to add to the nervousness of the scene. To create a camera shake, the first thing we need to do is create a camera shake component. So to do that, use Control Space to open your content browser. Put it at the top level, that's where we'll create it for now, and right click and select Create Blueprint Class. Then go down to the bottom of this screen, expand all classes and search for Shake. And we want this matinee camera shake element. So select that and we'll call it Backroom Camera Shake. And now we need to set up the parameters for this. So double click to open it up, place it at the top of the screen. We're not really interested in anything except the details over here. So the first thing we need to do is set the duration of the shake. At the moment it's not shaking at all, so just stick a load of 9s in here to make it the maximum value, and then we're going to set the parameters for how it shakes. I'm not interested in shaking so you've got rotation, location. I'm not really interested in changing the location of the camera. I just want to rotate it up and down, that's pitch, and left and right, that's yaw. So we'll change the amplitude and frequency here to 1, random rotation start point, and a sine wave would just go up and down in a regular fashion. Let's change that to noise so it goes up and down randomly. And we'll set the yaw, which is the left and right rotation, the same. So amplitude and frequency 1, random rotation start, and noise. And we don't want to change the roll. I did try changing the roll, but that goes from side to side and it looks a little bit drunk, so I didn't go for that. So we finished creating the camera shake component, so compile and save that. Now what we need to do is apply that component to the first person camera. So go back into your content, make sure you've got it at the top level, and search for first so we can find our BP first person character. Open it up and go to the viewport and select the camera. So what we want to do is we want to attach a camera shake component to this first person camera. So up at the top here where it says add components, you can say add, type in shake, and you've got this camera shake source. So you can see that's been placed underneath the first person camera. And if you come over to the right hand side, then we can now select the camera shake we want to apply. So under this camera shake drop down, you've got backroom camera shake as an option, and we can also tick on auto start, which will start as soon as the level is loaded. So click on that as well, compile and save. Let's go into play mode, leave that open for a second and let's try this out. Go into play mode and there you go. You can see that I'm not moving at the moment, but my camera is slightly moving from left to right and up and down. So the next thing I want to do is I want to add a little bit of graffiti on the wall. just to break up the monotony ever so slightly. We don't want to do too much inside our room because it wants to be fairly repetitive and monotonous, but I want to add this graffiti just to give it sort of one point of interest. For our graffiti, we're going to use Quixel Bridge again. If you go into the Add menu, Quixel Bridge, you'll notice there's this section here called Decals, and decals are items that can be applied to underlying textures. So we can put these on our walls, floors, and you can see there's blood splatters, graffiti, all sorts of things in here. What I did is I went into the graffiti section, and if I show you the one I found, I searched here until I found this "Who is here" graffiti tag. So search through the graffiti until you find something you're interested in. It doesn't have to be the same as me, but I thought "Who is here" is a pretty nice bit of graffiti to have sprayed on our backrooms wall. So with it selected, just like before with our textures, select the quality. So I'm going for medium quality, click on the download button, and then once it's downloaded, click on add, and it will add a new folder into your project under the Megascans Decals subfolders. So we're finished with Bridge again, so shut that down. And to add in our graffiti, it's just a simple matter of dragging it and dropping it where we want it. So I'm going to move around in the viewport, and I'm going to put it on this end wall here. So I'm going to sort of go up to close by. I'm going to drag this MI, or Material Instance Graffiti, on here, and what you'll notice is that it's the wrong orientation at the moment, so don't worry about that. Just drop it on there. Okay, we'll shut this down now, and now what we can do is we can rotate it around on the axis until it's projecting properly. The way that decals work is you put them just in front of the surface, and they project their texture onto the surface. So use the E key to switch the mode to rotation, and just use a different rotation. So you've got rotation on the Z axis, X axis and Y. Choose the Z one first and rotate it around 90 degrees. Actually, it's not that one. Try the other axes. So there you go. So I've then rotated it on the y-axis, I think, 90 degrees. So now we've got it the right way. If it's upside down, obviously you can rotate it around again. And the last thing you want to do is we want to scale it down so that it fits on the wall. So if you press the R key, it now changes to the scale tool. And with the middle selected here, you can just drag it in and out. So there we go, we can move it in here, and then W to go back to the move tool, and we can move it over a little bit so it's on the end here. So that's how you position the graffiti, and we can also change the appearance here as well. So at the moment it's quite opaque and it's pure white paint. Maybe I want it so that it looks like it's showing some of the yellow underneath. So to do that, let's do a quick save here. Let's select our graffiti in the outliner, and if you go to the decal material here, click here to browse to it in the menu, and then double click to open it up. And what you'll see here, let's move it over slightly, is there is a variety of settings we can change. So the one I'm interested in here is the opacity. So you can change all sorts of things here, like whether it's metallic or how rough it is. So go into the opacity intensity. If I make the opacity 0, it's invisible because it's see-through. If I make it 0.5, it's sort of half see-through. But if I do something like 0.1 or 0.2, actually 0.1 is quite nice. It's showing some of that yellow through here. So save that and close it down, and we now have a bit of graffiti in our level, and we're almost at the end of creating this level. Final thing I want to do, and it's quite an important area, is to add some audio to really sell that chilling atmosphere. So I want to create two audio components to really sell the atmosphere in this level. The first one is a VHS static sound that's going to play throughout the level, which implies that I'm carrying my camera around. And the second one is a sort of an eerie, cool sound that I want triggered when I'm standing in front of the graffiti. So first thing we need to do is find our sounds and get them into the level. You can obviously go and look for the sounds you want. I recommend sites like freesounds.org to find them, or you could even make your own. What I've done is I've found a couple of sounds and I've edited them down to suit this level. You just need to make sure they're the right format. So they usually need to be something like a 16-bit WAV file. So as I said, I found the two sounds that I want. If you follow the link in the description, you can download those from Google Drive and use those. So we need to get them into the project. Open up the content browser. Let's go to the top level and create a new folder called Sounds and go into that. And then if I open up my Windows Explorer, here are the two WAV files that you'll have downloaded. So select both of them and drag them into this folder and it'll import them. Okay, and once you've got them in here, you can play them and see what they sound like. So my VHS static sound is quite a long sound. So this will act nicely as our sort of background sound throughout the level. And the other one is this sort of eerie sound. Implying something going on in the distance, which will play when the person is in front of the graffiti. Now what we need to do is we need to make sure this static sound loops around so that it doesn't just suddenly cut off a couple of minutes into the game. So to do that, double click on it and just make sure that the looping flag here is set on so it will loop around. And that's all we need to do in preparing our sounds. Now we just need to apply the sounds to the player. So for the static, for the VHS static sound, it's pretty straightforward. We go into our content browser, go to the top level and search for first to find our BP first person character. And here, if you go to the left hand side, we want to add an audio component to our character. So click on add audio and you just want this audio component here, and let's call it VHS audio. Doesn't really matter what you call it. And if you come over to the details on the right hand side, we now want to select our sound. So go in here, type VHS, and there's the VHS static sound, and we probably want to auto activate it as well. Let's have a look down here. Yeah, it's done by default. So you see this auto, further down here there's auto activate checked on. What that means is this sound will start playing as soon as the level starts, and we've made sure that the sound is looping, so it should continue to play. So that's everything done for the first sound. Compile and save. Let's go into play mode and see if we get the sound. And it all works fine. So the second thing I want to do is, as I approach this graffiti, I want that other sound to trigger. And this involves a little bit more work because we'll have to put in a little trigger box for this sound. So to do that, go into our content sounds folder again. Make sure you've got your search switched off so you can see everything. And what we'll do here now is we'll right click and create a new blueprint class of an actor, and we'll call this BP underscore sound trigger. Doesn't really matter what you call it. I use BP for blueprints. And we will open this up Stick it on the top, and what we need to do is we need to put in a box that will act as a trigger first within this. So if you do add and search for box, you will find this box collision. So click on that, and there's our box that will act as our trigger for the sound. So enter there, and now what we'll do is we will add audio just like before here, and what we need to do now is we need to make it so that this box triggers this audio, or when you go into this box it triggers the audio. So what you'll notice is that actually we need to set up the audio first, which audio we want to play. So with the audio here, select the sound. If you search for eerie, that was the sound we imported, eerie call. So that's the sound we'll play, but it won't play by default. Go back to the box and you'll see there's this event, begin overlap. So it says it will fire when another actor overlaps this actor, for example the player walking into a trigger. So click on that or double click on it, and what we want to do is from this event drag over here and type play audio, and it knows there's an audio component already associated with this blueprint, so it puts that in here. So what will happen is as soon as we go into this box it will play the audio, which is exactly what we want. So compile and save that, and now we can put that sound trigger wherever we want in our level. So we want it roughly here, so drag it out, drop it in here. If you can't see it, you might have got your game, if you remember we had this G key for switching on and off the game view, so make sure that you toggle that until you see the box. And now what we can do is we can move it around. You might need to move around slightly to see it, something like that. And again, you know, if your snap's set to 1 meter, you might want to set that down to sort of ½ meter just to move it around. So just get it into place. And it's also, this one is quite small at the moment as well, so we can scale it up. So let's scale it up to 3 times. That looks better. Yeah, so now we've got that box in the corner. So whenever somebody goes into that corner, it will play that level. So let's do a save and let's test it out. So first thing I notice is the sound played straight away. So I wonder if that auto activate is set for the sound. We need to make sure that's not the case. So come out of play mode. Let's go back to the sound trigger, and with our audio selected, go down, yeah, to auto activate. So unlike our VHS static, we don't want it to activate when the level starts. We only want it to activate when we go through the trigger. So make sure that's unchecked, compile, save, and now let's give it another go. And that's great. So already we're in the level, we can hear the VHS static, but we can't hear the eerie noise. Let's go up to this corner. And there's the sound playing. And when we walk away, it stopped. If we go back to that corner, it starts playing again. So we're pretty much done with our level here. If you want to see it in full screen, by the way, if you press F11 while you're playing, so let's go back into play, press F11, so select the viewport first, and now you can see it in full screen mode in all its glory. So we've finished creating the game from the beginning of our project all the way through to this final playable level. The last thing we ought to do is package it up so that we can send it to other people to play. So let's do that as the final task in this tutorial. Before we package our game, we really ought to make sure that the player has a ability to quit the game. So let's set up a key for quitting the game, maybe a couple like escape and the Q key. So to do that, we go into Edit, Project Settings, go down here until you find Input, and what we'll do is we will open up the action mappings here and add a new one which we're going to call Quit Game. So this is where you set up the keys or the key bindings. So here we'll set up, if you press the key value here, we can select Q, and then we can add another one, press the keyboard here and press escape. So if the player presses Q or escape, it'll fire this quit game event. So let's before we come out of this, something else we need to do as well is go up to the top and choose maps and modes. And what we're going to choose here is the level that both the level that will open when we're in the editor. So let's choose our Backrooms Level 0, so you don't have to open it manually every time you open this project. And more importantly, the default level for the game. So when we start this game, the built game, we want the Backrooms Level 0 to be the level that starts up. So make sure you've got those two selected. And now we need to just add the quit logic to our first person character. So go back into the content browser, go to the top level, search for first to find our BP first person character. And we haven't done anything here so far, but this event graph here is where all of the logic for moving around happens. What we just need to do is find a bit of empty space and right click and do input action quit, and you'll find your quit game action here. And all you need to do is select off the pressed button here and type quit game. As simple as that. So all that will happen is that when you press the keys that are associated with that action, which in our case are Q and escape, it will quit the game. So it gives the player a way of getting out without having to press Alt F4, go into Task Manager. So let's compile and save. All right, so let's talk about building the game. We're just going to build it for Windows at the moment. So what you need to do is go into this Platforms menu, select Windows, and then first of all choose the output of the game that you want. So while you're in development mode, you can use the sort of debug and development options, but you don't want to give that to a final user in that mode. You want to do it in shipping, which will be smaller and leaner and without some extra features. So you want to select that. The second thing is you need to make sure that you have the SDK installed for Windows, and it may be the case that when you fire up Unreal Engine 5 for the first time you don't have this. So what I'll do is I will provide a link to this page, which is something that people fall foul of. This is what you need to do before you package the game. So make sure you follow these two steps. First of all, there's a file you need to copy, and to do that first. Secondly, you need to install this .NET Core runtime in order to have the SDK for Windows. So make sure you do these two steps, and also as a final step I would restart your PC completely to make sure that that's completely taken. Once you've done that, you'll come in here, go to your platform, Windows, choose shipping, and you'll see here the installed SDK, so everything's good. And then all you need to do is click this package project. So click on that and it will ask you for the folder where you want to package the project. So this is my project folder at the moment. What I tend to do, but you can put it wherever you like, is I tend to create a new folder here called build, select that and click select folder. Then what will happen is that you will see this packaging project for Windows. Here, if you show the output log, lots of things are going on, and the first time it compiles and packages your project, it'll take a long time. So don't be surprised if it takes a few minutes or even like half an hour or so, but subsequent times it'll be pretty quick. So I'll restart the video once the complete package has been produced, and I'll show you how you run it. Okay, so I'm back again. It actually only took about sort of 30 seconds or so, and you can see I've got this build successful here. So if I go into Windows Explorer and go to that project, so where it is Backrooms tutorial build, you'll see that there is this folder called Windows, and within there is your exe file, Backrooms tutorial. So basically everything within this build Windows folder is what you need to package up and send. So if you're sending it to somebody else, you just zip this content up, and then when it's unzipped, it's the Backroom tutorials exe file they need to run on. So if we double click on this, there we go. Our game is packaged up, ready to send, and you can build on this in any way you feel you want to. So I hope you found this tutorial useful. Be interested to know if you want other Backrooms levels covered. There's our eerie call. If you do want other levels, let me know in the comments, and stay subscribed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.